Talking about being concerned about your elderly loved ones, worrying about elderly parents is something that many of us can relate to, especially if they are in ill health. Now, a recent survey has found that over a third of adults are concerned about their parents' physical health, but 81% of those people are then reluctant to have a conversation about possible care options, because it is a really, really difficult conversation to broach. And I know whenever we talk about this, so many of you out there, it resonates with you because our parents start to need some extra help, and it can kind of creep up slowly, so it doesn't just happen overnight. And I've obviously had this with both my parents. So initially, it wasn't just about having a conversation with my dad, who had developed Alzheimer's. It was more about my mum, because by the time we realised how... We didn't know anything about Alzheimer's then. I'm much more informed now. By the time we realised what it involved and how his behaviours would be and how challenging it was, he was well into having Alzheimer's, and my mum was dedicated to looking after him, which she did for nearly 11 years in their home, which was amazing. But my sister and I could start to see how it was affecting her. So then we were having to navigate this conversation more with my mum than my dad, because he was just being looked after. He was quite happy, actually. You know, my mum was doing everything for him, but she was making herself quite unwell. And it is a really difficult conversation, because every time we kind of went, oh, you know, Daddy may need a bit more help. And she's like, no, no, he's comfortable here and he knows his way around. And she's very, very defensive. And eventually it was kind of the health visitor who's, you know, we said, look, we're really concerned about her, that she said, look, we're going to get some respite care, which we did for a week. And then they said, oh, you know, a permanent bed has become available. And my mum then wanted to talk to us about it. Then we had to kind of persuade her. And then you have that awful thing as a daughter going, we're actually sitting here persuading my mum that our father needs to go into a care home.
That must be hard.
It's really hard. And so I totally understand now, looking back, you know, maybe we should have had the conversation with them earlier, both of them, when they were in good health, to say, you know, is this something we all need to think about?
Yeah, my auntie and uncle were really, really needing a live-in carer or really intensive support, and they were refusing to have that help. And they were in Llandudno in North Wales, and my cousins, their two sons, are in London. And it was really, really difficult. And in the end, Auntie Vi passed a level, as you say, where I would go up and have a Christmas dinner with them and try to broach the subject. And I know my cousins went up religiously every month. They wouldn't talk about it. And then Auntie Vi got so much worse. She agreed to go in a care home around the corner, and I know my cousins felt terrible about it. In fact, you know, even talking about it for me is quite emotional. And then Uncle Ray died within 2 weeks, so she had the double thing of being in the care home. Although everybody was very nice to her there, and Uncle Ray had just passed away in his sleep. But I think that it is really difficult because older people are stubborn. I know I'm stubborn.
Yeah,
never.
No, but I think it's really, really hard. People in the studio are just laughing. But my mother stopped eating, for example, towards the end of her life. She was definitely, now I would say, suffering from a form of dementia because she was refusing to eat, and yet she refused to talk about it. And I don't know what you do.
The thing is as well that often your relationship, you feel, has changed from parent-child to you feel like the parent.
Exactly.
And what you have to be very careful about, I mean, we were looking at Age UK's advice and saying, don't start a conversation saying what you think should happen. Right. You know, I think that you need this, and I think that you should be doing this, and we think that you should do this. It's like you can voice your concerns and say, what do you think you might like to do? Have you thought about this? And it's really hard because there are times with my mum, hello, Mum, love you, she watches, where sometimes I'll be doing that bossiness that I have about me, and she goes along with stuff, and then very occasionally she goes, yes, Ruth, I'm not 5. And then I feel awful, and I think, actually, yes, I have just spoken to her like she's a 5-year-old.
What if you put the ball in their court and their personality is such that they go, I don't want to do anything, I'm absolutely fine as I am, thank you very much. You know, I don't know, I think it's a lot to do with different personalities, for example. So Gary's mum actually was very happy to go into a care home, and she quite enjoyed it because she had become lonely.
Yeah.
You know, she was living on her own and we would see her as much as we could, but she liked company and, you know, and when the times that we would then go and visit her, we encountered a different person because she'd sort of had a bit of regeneration. But then other people are very ferociously independent and they don't want to move away from their house and their things. You know, however much you say, well, I'll put all your things into a new room. And I don't know, I think in the end, I think a lot of people just think, well, you know what, if when they get to a certain stage in life, if that's what they want, then just let it be and see what happens, because...
But then you worry about them having a fall or leaving the
But then that could then become the thing that forces the issue that they then can't look after.
Because we talk about it now, and this might be happening to us in the not-too-distant future, you know, and it does make you think as well about your own...
Well, yeah,
years ahead.
Even for ourselves, if we were to be sensible enough to have this conversation with our friends, family and children, what age are we suggesting we start that conversation? Do we open it up as early as you can, or do you say around my 65th birthday, maybe? Yeah, it's a really hard thing to gauge.
Well, I'm 74 and I haven't had it, and I don't want to be looked after and I don't want to go in a care home, and I feel quite strongly about that. But, you know, that's probably a very selfish point of view.
It's not selfish, it's just how you actually feel right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and I see that the government, somebody in the government is saying and moaning on about older people occupying their homes that they should be selling and downsizing.
Stop rattling around in a big house.
Rattling around a big house. Well, I'm sorry, we live in a free society. If they want to do that, they can do that.
And they're paying for it themselves. They're not expecting the state to pay for it. But, I don't know, I just sort of think... I remember when I go on my travels, you know, pre-COVID, I remember meeting this couple. I think they were probably like late 60s, early 70s, and I think I was in Myanmar, and I said, oh, you know what you're doing? They said, we're skiing. And I went, in Myanmar? And they went, yes, spending the kids' inheritance. Yeah. And they were just off travelling around the world and do it. You know,
and it does make
maybe
you
that's
think
how I'm going to go.
The costs themselves, I have to admit, I was very ignorant to knowing, like, how much it would cost to even live in a care home. And I did a little bit of research, and the monthly average is £2,820. That's 26 years worth of holidays.
That's low compared to a lot.
Is it?
Yeah, that's
the average. But
that's the national average, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's the national
depending on where you live.
So £3,000 is exactly. If that's your benchmark, who's saving that aside for their family or for their parents
they
or
have
for themselves?
To sell their homes or take second mortgages.
Exactly.
But maybe because we've talked about it now, and you saying, when do you have that conversation? In hindsight, you know, and I've had this with both parents, maybe you have it as soon as you can, when your parents are...
But they might change their minds.
No, but as in, you just start the conversation now, as in, have you ever thought... You know, because even when my dad died, we didn't even really know what kind of funeral he wanted. We never really discussed it. I mean, I hope we gave him a good send-off.
But you should do it.
You know, we're very kind of British about that, aren't we? We're like, we don't really talk about death. We don't really talk about those uncomfortable things. And so now, looking back, I wish I'd asked him what kind. You know, do you want to be buried, cremated? What music would you like?
They call it a living will, don't they?
Yeah. So maybe a living will to say, if you didn't want a care home, there are other options of having care in your own home, and maybe it is something, because financially you have to...
Yeah, you
end up having to be in control of that as well. Anyway, it's such a huge subject. It's a huge subject, and we just wanted to kind of open that conversation today, because I know so many of you out there are facing this right now. So if you do need any advice or guidance, anything that we've just discussed there, go onto the ITV website and you'll find lots of useful information on there.